Aaron Keller. Space Oddity is the name of that song. Thank you, Aaron. That was awesome. So I asked Aaron to sing that song today because for me, it gives me the feel of what we're doing here today. As you saw in your handout, brochure, bulletin, our talk here today is about adventure through inner space. I'm here to launch a 6-week talk series on the book Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It's this book here, if you haven't picked it up already. It's a book that many Unity folks have been studying throughout the Unity movement. It's a book that has transformed my life. And I hope that you will take in the words that Michael Singer has for us and apply it to your lives and see what happens. So when I hear this song, Space Oddity, I get this feeling, yes, of being in space. That free-floating feeling. And that's the feeling, in some ways, that I'm aiming for at this point. Today, I want to focus, though, on this idea of going not into outer space, but into inner space. I want to talk about 3 things in particular. The first is, what's the point? What's the value of this journey that we seem to continually talk about here in Unity, which is go within? And then second, I want to talk about what is it should we expect to see when we journey within? What sorts of creatures live within our inner space, if you will? And then finally, I want to talk about the fact how what Singer talks about in this book, which is the idea of becoming the witnesses to the objects in our consciousness or our minds, that by doing that, we don't actually become more like spectators of our lives. It's the complete opposite. Ironically, by stepping back, by being the witness to these thought creatures, these feeling, emotion creatures in our consciousness, we actually become more alive. We come into a greater or full awareness. So those are the 3 points I want to share with you today. First, so Michael Singer opens his book with this beautiful passage from Shakespeare's Hamlet. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, that thou canst not then be false to any man. This above all, he says, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, that thou canst not then be false to any man. So as we hear these beautiful words, we're reminded of the fact that in order to live a life of authenticity with one another, in order to show up authentically in our own lives, we must first come to be true to ourselves. But you know, the problem with this is it really begs the question for me. What self? The annoyed DMV self? My irritable morning self? My passionate ministerial self? Which self? And now this also assumes that I get to decide which self is showing up. And I don't know if any of you have ever acted out of anger, but I can tell you that I didn't seem to have any control over that self showing up in that moment, right? Or how many of you have been in a situation where you've got this success-going self, moving towards your goal of healthy and happy relationship, moving toward this goal of successful career, and then your self-saboteur shows up. That self shows up, seemingly unbidden, right? It was the Apostle Paul who talked about this in Romans when he said, you know, I do not know why it is I do what I do. Because I seem to not do what I want to do. and instead I do the very thing I hate. Have we ever been in that situation where we feel like, we're gonna do this diet, we're gonna start, and then we do the very opposite? The path of self-knowledge, all our great masters and teachers have told us, is the path of coming into what we call the seat of the soul, coming to know the self that lies beyond the angry self, the irritable self, the self that can bear witness to all those other selves and then choose. That is the place of power. And there is a beautiful, beautiful quote from our very own Unity co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, in the Unity classic, How to Let God Help You. She says, "The causing power is mind. And only through knowledge of this power shall we be able to deal successfully with those restless shadows called human life that appear upon the external canvas of eternity." I'll repeat that. The causing power of our outer lives is our minds, our consciousness. Only through knowledge of this power shall we be able to deal successfully with those restless shadows called human life that appear upon the external canvas of eternity. The restless shadows, that describes my life, right? So, this leads to my second point, which is when we, at least in the movies, when I picture people going into outer space, I see it as this very peaceful adventure. They're going beyond the sound barrier, and there's this, moment where everything's like silent and peaceful. That's what it seems like to me, to go into outer space. Well, my understanding of going into inner space is it's a completely opposite experience. When we start to go into inner space, there's a cacophony of sound, voices everywhere in our heads, talking incessantly. We are trying to watch the screen of our lives, and instead of just watching it, just let me watch and experience this, we've got a narrator in here, right? Telling us exactly what this means, what it's about, how I should interpret it, and how I should plan for the next step. I've thought of it as like a narrator at an amusement park. I've thought of it as maybe sometimes, if we've experienced this, like an overzealous docent at an art museum. You're just trying to look at the picture. They have to tell you everything about it, what they know, what you should see. So that's the narrator in our own consciousness so often, right? Michael Singer teaches us a path of going beyond these voices. And you would think that we'd be able to go beyond by simply ignoring the voice, just continually ignoring the voice. But what's tricky about these voices is they sound like us, right? They're in our own minds. They sound like us. They purport to be speaking on our own behalf to watch out for us, right? They're probably going off right now, thinking about the day. Wow, it's hot outside. Wow, it's cold in here. Did I water the plants this morning? Oh my God, my stomach's growling. Why did I water the plants instead of eat breakfast? Oh, I wonder who else bought the book already. Should I leave the service early so I can get in line to buy the book? Will there be a line? Should I read the book? Should I go to the discussion group? Well, if I wait in line, maybe I won't get there in time for the discussion group. It's those kinds of thoughts constantly narrating our present moment experience, right? So, as I read this book, my husband is also on a spiritual path, so we decided to read this book together. And so we open it up to the inner roommate section, and we decide, wouldn't it be fun to name each other's inner roommates? Yeah. So after about 10 minutes of quarreling over what our inner roommates really said, we actually did decide on names for our inner roommate. So my inner roommate is now called Roz. And apparently she's the crabby secretary in Monsters, Inc., according to Victor. He picked mine first, so I got to pick his. According to me, Victor's inner roommate is that guy Felix on The Odd Couple. He cleans incessantly, right? Okay, so I don't recommend you do this at home with your loved one. I recommend that you assign your own names. But that said, there was immense value for us in doing this, because what happened? We started to really get it. I mean, we knew this intellectually, but somehow personifying it like this made us really get the fact that if we were shooting off things from like the seat of our pants rather than from the seat of our souls, it wasn't Victor and Nhien in conversation. It wasn't us talking, it was Roz and Felix. Right? And then, so I'm going to create a totally hypothetical situation for you in which Roz and Felix are chatting. So what happens is Roz comes upstairs to her desk, sits down. I mean, God, you've been working so hard, she tells herself. So tired, and you have so much more work to do. Wait a minute. Where's that glass of water that you put on the table? No. Oh, he didn't do that again, did he? Oh, okay. So Roz calls down to Felix and says, Victor, where's my glass of water? He's downstairs. Felix calls up and says, oh, I put it by the sink to be cleaned. And Roz calls downstairs and said, well, but it was half full. It was half full. I wasn't finished with it. And then Felix calls up, yeah, but you have 5 glasses of water throughout the house. Roz, those are all the places that I get thirsty. What am I gonna do? I'm so tired, I've worked so hard, and all I wanted was a glass of water. Felix, well, now you can have a clean glass of water. That was a totally hypothetical situation in our household. Yeah. Yeah, when we're not conscious, our inner roommates speak on our behalf. But of course, it doesn't take even another person in the room, right? It doesn't even take another person in the room for our inner roommate to create trouble. And sure, this is, a fairly funny example, but I have to say that for many of us, these inner roommates are extremely painful to hear. Or they can be, or have been at certain stages in our lives. I think before Roz, my inner roommate was like Attila the Hun, something like that. 12 years ago, I remember I was, 10 pounds lighter than I am, much thinner than I am now. And I remember this inner roommate that I had a really cruel and malicious voice and a highly critical voice where I would get up, look in the mirror, and she would say, oh my God, your thighs look disgusting. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't matter that you came home at 9 o'clock last night from work. You really should have gone to the gym. Oh, do you really want to be eating that extra lean cuisine meal then? Maybe you should skip breakfast today and work out extra. Now, this actually isn't a hypothetical story. I actually heard this from my inner roommate at one point in my life. So, if inner roommates can be so nasty, then why should we go within? Why don't we just kind of go about our generally comfortable everyday lives and not listen, not pay attention to these voices? That leads to my final point for today. And that's this, that it is really only by looking straight on at these voices in our heads, identifying them, even personifying them, objectifying them, can we ever really gain distance from them. Because again, they speak in our voice. We think that they're us. I thought it was me talking to myself in the mirror. Until we can step back, personify, make fun of, have fun with this, create the character, recognize that this is not me, we will never be free. Can you feel even the possibility of that spaciousness as you watch your own thoughts here now in this moment? What are you saying? What is this voice saying to you? Is it kind? Is it true? We're so often willing to entertain thoughts in our own head from this inner roommate that we would never tolerate from someone outside ourselves, right? Those kinds of things that they would say. So, in conclusion, I want to take you on a journey with the help of these amazing ministers here, Duke and Sandra, on these 6 weeks. A journey not just into yourselves, because you know, a lot of times when we talk about the spiritual journey, we think, oh, yes, this is the journey from my head to my heart. And that is a very valuable way of looking at our spiritual journeys. But the path that I'm inviting you into is actually to go yet deeper into yourself than that, to a place that Singer says is beyond self. It's not into our hearts, it's beyond feeling and beyond thought. As I was exploring the material in this book, it made me really think of the paradox that is spoken in the Bible. And I'll read you 2 different passages from the Bible that really strike me. The paradox is that while we are most our true selves at this point, when we're in that place of full awareness, our sense of personal identity actually vanishes. And so for me, this made this particular Bible passage come alive. Galatians chapter 6, verse 3. For if those who are nothing think they are something, they deceive themselves. For if those who are nothing, no thing, think they are something, they deceive themselves. And yet, on the other hand, we hear in Psalms 82, verse 6, you are God's, the children of the Most High, all of you. You are God's, and you are nothing. How is this both true? We can't know this truth intellectually. I can't impart this truth on you. I could shout it all I like. No book can give you this truth. But with the help of spiritual community, we can continually point back at each other and say the truth does lie in you. You will never know what this means until you experience it directly in your own being. And the irony, though, the other paradox of this spiritual journey is this. It is a journey that each of us, however sometimes we want to be able to take it for someone else that we love, it's a journey that each of us can only take within the recesses of our own consciousness. It's a journey that each of us inevitably must take alone. But again, the paradox is that it's a journey that I don't believe any one of us could ever really take alone without the support, the help, the mirroring of our spiritual community, people that will continually point back at you and say, within you is God. Within you is pure awareness. Within you is the seat of your own soul from which all freedom to not act out from our conditioning, to not act out from your fears, all freedom lies. It's like, the way I think of it is as if I'm this free-floating soul, but I saw this planet, and the planet seemed to have these very inviting creatures. And I check it out, and I go in, and I like these creatures, even though they're all kind of naysayers, but I kind of like them. And then after a while, I become like them. I start to dress like them. I start to act like them, right? And then I forget who I was. I think I'm one of them. I don't think I could go into another space of possibility. So in spiritual community, imagine if we all did this together, the power of our collective consciousness, the power that might be necessary to be that fuel, you know, when the space shuttle's all the way out in outer space, it's all floaty, right? It doesn't take any energy, but it takes a lot of energy and fuel just to defy gravity, the gravity of our conditioning. And sometimes, by joining together our light, our consciousness, we can help one another to defy the gravity of our conditioning and to live free lives in the seat of each of our own souls. So I invite you to do this in these weeks, starting right now, as we prepare now for a time of meditation. I invite you to close your eyes. And before we go fully into this time, I want to share a word of blessing with you. So close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and take in these words. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown. Engines on. Check ignition. And may God's love be with you this day. So it is.
Our thoughts are prayers. And in that inner space, that secret place of the Most High, where the kingdom of God dwells within each of us, we are always praying. I invite you now to find a comfortable position in your seats. Fully release and let go of anything in the physical realm and in consciousness be keeping you from being in the present moment. Just let go. Take a deep, relaxing breath. And affirm in your mind, I am. I am in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, light, and wisdom. In the deep recesses of your consciousness are all the answers you seek. As thoughts to the contrary try to invade your inner space, just let them go. Wave them gently by, like a soft, billowing cloud on a bright blue sky. And know that God is always there, in the silence. return